Thank you out there. Okay, this is going to be a very interactive session. I actually like getting down with the crowd and getting questions answered. Young Paul here, he's going to be running around with a microphone. So if you're sitting at the back because you want to check your email or you're bored, many reasons, you don't want him running around and having a heart attack. And secondly, I will actually ask more questions of the people sitting in the back. So you two, that does not mean sitting in the front avoids questions or walking out. Bye. Very interesting. Do you speak English? Just checking. That has happened to me before. Okay, so little background. If you look at this, I actually had arguably the best job a QA tester / whatever you want had, in my opinion, in the entire world. Up until January, I lived in the United States for 21 years, and I returned to London. My last job title was the Senior Manager of Quality Assurance and Agile Practices for Walt Disney Theme Parks and Resorts Orlando. I had a magical job. I'm not going to swear. I fell into something that was unbelievable. When Walt Disney, if you've ever, who's been to Disney World, Disneyland, Disney Paris, whatever, any of them? Other than the lines, the quality that Disney puts into everything, the focus on customer satisfaction to make parents cry their eyes out when they actually have to hand over the money to make their kids happy, but the quality is arguably probably the best in the world. Anyone here been on a Disney cruise? Yeah? No? Oh, unbelievable. Can be better than the QE2. But they always focus on quality, and Walt himself said, number one is quality, all these different principles that aligned with Agile. So when I walked into Disney for my interviews, the guy who I was going to report to said to me, whoever we hire, Ray, I give complete power to get our programs, get these projects off the ground with no sacrifice to quality. We'd like to get them in on time, but quality will not be sacrificed. So arguably, I had the best job in the bloody world until I started. So I walked in, and I had to get an idea of what was going on. We were working on an extremely large program. If you're wondering why I'm talking about Disney here and why the title's Test Data Management, it will make sense in a few more slides. I was brought in to govern or lead governorship over a number of very large consulting companies. I'm not going to name them because that would be liable, but they were big, and you all know them. There were internal, external development teams. We had testers, developers, business analysts, architecture, all these groups distributed around the world over 4 continents. We had Agile-like development going on in some of these silos. We had traditional waterfall. We had many different methodologies. I discovered very quickly the PMO, the project management organization, placed himself on this lovely pedestal and ruled the roost. And I had to think, well, how am I going to deal with this? Because the PMO really have no idea how to produce work. Hands up, anyone here not in testing? Go on. Microphone. Quickly. Come on. I'm going to give you a heart attack. So you're not in testing. What do you do?
Well, I am in testing, but I'm a developer at heart, so I sort of cheat at testing.
You're a developer. You don't cheat at testing. You just need to learn the right way of doing things.
Right.
Very biased. Thank you.
Yeah. That's it.
That's it. Thank you. Hands up. Who is a tester? Keep your hands up if you're in QA. Keep your hands up if English is your first language. I didn't think so. All right, we'll pick on you, because you're nearest. So you're a tester, and you're in QA?
I'm a QA engineer, actually, and still testing as well. I mean, QA, quality assurance is a process, it's not some action, one-time action. That's why, as we participate from very beginning of getting requirements and do all the clarification with developers with customers from very beginning, I can surely say that I'm in quality assurance process as well. But as I do testing, functional testing, performance testing, regression testing as tasks, as actions, I can say that I'm tester as well.
Okay.
So it's both.
And traditionally, that's right behind my ears. Traditionally, that's what testers do. But I always ask, what is the difference between QA and testing?
Because QA is a process,
Yep.
and testing is just the final step of development
So is
of
it
the
only
product.
testers that are in QA groups?
Sorry?
Are testers the only role inside of a QA
No.
group? Who else?
In the QA, whole the QA process is like indispensable part of every action in software development.
It is.
Starting from requirement development, ending during development
You're
itself.
reading my script. You're reading my script. What I'm trying to say, and I totally agree with you, is that QA is much more important than testing. We've heard it all this week. Most people can test. Not everyone can be part of a quality implementation. That was one of the major challenges I had on this program, is that I had literally hundreds of testers available to me, but there was no influence going up the development scale. There was too many organizations, too many silos. So one of my goals was to actually influence quality inside a very large organization, and it's difficult, large or small. One of the fun parts of the job was the third from last bullet point. I worked with Imagineers. Ever heard that expression? An Imagineer is a true engineer, not software. They're the people who develop the rides, the entrance gates, the experiences that you have when you walk around Disney. And I actually got my teams involved after midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning going into the parks to test the rides for the new features that were being developed. So it really was a magical experience, except on the Tower of Terror, which absolutely terrified me as it kept on going up and down. My responsibility overall was to support all forms of testing, non-functional, functional performance, user acceptance. I was given test environmental control. I've never controlled an environment in any of my career. That was a completely separate job. And the one that really killed me was that QA was now in control of the data. Now, show of hands, who believes that QA should own the data when you're testing? One hand. Paul, stop checking your email. Gentleman in the blue shirt, serves you right for holding your hand up. Why do you think QA should own the test data?
Okay. In my experience, these are the only people that are really aware that you need such a thing like test data that needs to be maintained.
That's a good answer. What about development test data or seed data?
In my experience, the developers don't have much data. They try to do some unit testing stuff and then they're stuck.
They're stuck.
Yes.
Okay. Anyone have any, thank you, any other differing opinions?
My exercise for the week.
That is simply not true.
We're not going to get into an argument, we're just going to hear some opinions.
We have such a large scale of data with the dependencies that we have to clone production data, and they are given to also to developers because they are simply not able to create such a complicated cubes with their time.
Thank you. How many people here work in environments where they clone, copy, take some form of version of production data? Keep your hands up as I ask these questions. How many of you work in a financial organization? So, the people who have their hands up, there's 4 of you working, you can put your hands down now. So at least 4 people here work in a financial organization that have access to production data, such as credit card numbers, bank account numbers, names, addresses, salaries, etc. You do know that, well, according to which country, you do know that's illegal in most countries. Oh no. Switzerland, Britain, America, and probably many others, it is absolutely illegal to make personalized information and identifiable information accessible to anyone outside of the people who own that data. We're going to get into an argument here. Which country? I don't know anything about Armenia. I've been in the States 21 years. I have no idea
Our
what it
company is not a financial company, but
Okay.
I wanted to say regarding sensitive data, we do copy just once with agreement with operations, but beforehand we have provided script that was discussed with operations that removes all sensitive data
Good.
before it's
Yep.
provided to us.
And that's the way
So-
that it should be done,
Yeah,
before it
so-
actually gets to you.
Yeah, so only operations get copied the real database, they removed all sensitive data, then just after that we get that database.
Yep, and
So-
that's the right way. And
Yeah.
there's, oh, you have a question or a comment?
Financial data is
Finan-
not only personal data.
Oh, correct.
So financial data is not only personal data. For example, we have company data, trades, and we are cutting off the real addresses, for example, and the data is old after +1 day. So never mind.
Well, that's a great comment. That and many more issues I had to deal with at the program. It wasn't only that we stored information about our guests, where they were going to stay, how they were going to be paying for these things, their transactions, the ages of their kids and the families, etc. So I had an issue that I needed to supply data to my development teams, my testing teams, and different environments throughout the entire life cycle. Some of this, which was Agile. And we're going to talk about this in a minute. So I turned up at one of these small all-hands meetings of these programs, and I'm sitting there. I have my QA managers and a few testers with me, and I'm listening to the development managers stand up on the stage and talk about their first 1 or 2 sprints. And they're all talking about these Agile Points, velocity points that they'd achieved in the last sprint. Anyone here never heard of an Agile Point? Oh, this is fantastic, so I don't need to explain that screen, do I? So just an example, there were different silos of development. I got 6 here. Up they stood on the stage, and we did 50 points this sprint, and the next guy stood up and said, I did 100. Woman stands up and says, we did 300 points. And I'm thinking, wow, this is really good. They understand Agile development, and they're doing really well on their points. I didn't expect them to be the same because we estimate differently. The size of the teams may be different. The complexity of the work may be different. And I was really happy. A few weeks later, I'm sitting in the same all-hands meeting, and they bring up some charts, and they go, oh, wow. Silo 1's double their throughput. Silo 2's doing the same. Silo 4 is nearly tripled. What's changed? So I spoke to a few of the developers, not the dev managers. I said, what changed inside of your teams? Guess what they said to me? Come on, someone have a guess. We re-estimated their work because Silo 1 said, we're the same size as Silo 3. How the hell could they do 5, 6 times more work than us? And I went, that's not the way it works, guys. They really didn't understand what they were trying to do. But that still confused me because I turned around to my QA managers and I said, you guys are the ones that do the integration testing. We're looking at like 1,000 points of development work coming down the pipeline. How much did you do in sprint 1? They went, nothing worked. What about sprint 2? 3 points. I went, huh? Why couldn't you do any more? They said, as soon as we tried to test across these silos, it all fell apart. He says, they've all given us these unit test scripts that work fine as long as it's encapsulated inside of their environment. But, you know, Silo 1 worked with a family of 4 who had 3 kids under the age of 15 and wanted to stay at the Magic Kingdom and this, that, and the other. But that didn't kind of link into the ticketing system that we had to use. So what do you do? I said, we made a request for test data. I said, to who? They said, there's a ticketing system. We just opened up a ticket. I said, and they've responded when? Well, we don't know. So we had a data problem. It was apparently something that people just said it goes into a vacuum. So I needed to understand the landscape a little bit more. I saw that different groups had different versions of the same data model. The DBAs were basically running for cover as the requests were coming in, dozens a day for the new development implementations, from the developers, from the testers, from the performance guys. We had different methodologies going on, TDD, BDD, Waterfall, Scrum, XP, all the different time zones. Yeah, I had 2 people on my team assigned by one of these large consulting companies that produced data, supporting about 1,500 requests a week. I said, there's something wrong here. And I dug deeper and deeper. But the biggest thing that I discovered, apparently, was politics. You're dealing in a large company, as well as small, but in a large company, the politics are ridiculous. Disney has about 65,000 people working for it in Orlando. I've worked for Fidelity Investments. They had 36,000 people. I've worked for different banks, etc. The politics drive me crazy. I lost my head because of the politics. I just couldn't get anything done. Even though I'd put the requests in, I'd made great presentations of why we should be doing it this way, but people like building their little silos. But remember what I said. My senior VP at Disney said, I'm empowering you to get things done. We will not sacrifice quality. And I went, friggin' ace. Now I'm going to have some fun. Well, Agile was definitely more fragile. Most of the large consulting companies I work with thought, we'll send our people on Scrum training. So they were all Scrum Masters. Who's a Scrum Master here? Who's a Scrum Practitioner, which means you've been certified to the next level? Awesome, so am I. What do you think of a Scrum Master certification?
What do I think about it?
Yes. As Paul won't get up, I'll just get close, don't worry. You've never worked so hard. What do you think about Scrum Master certification versus Scrum Practitioner? What do you think about learning how to use a microphone?
I'm not. I think certification does not give you the experience you have with running projects. So
Yeah.
I'm not fan of certifications.
Anyone think differently about that? Anyone come out of Scrum certification thinking, I have power tingling from my fingertips now? No, neither did I. I do know that I had to hand over a couple of $1,000s to Ken Schwaber to be certified. What I found out was because we were so-called Agile, the consulting group sent everyone on Scrum Master training. They come back, I'm in a stand-up, and I say, explain the principles of Agile to me, please. Nothing. So they really didn't learn anything by having this, although we were Agile. The PMO controlled everything. There was documentation beyond belief because there were large organizations trying to manage change. DBAs just gave up. Architecture literally lived in a dream world. Not a magical dream world, but a dream world where they thought everything was fine. Why? Because they were in a nice little office somewhere where nobody spoke to them. Testing had nothing to do with QA and quality. They were purely just testers. I don't like that. I like my testers who work with me to be aggressive. I like to see them running up to a developer saying, your code's a piece of crap. And then they call me and say, yeah, it is. Hopefully they're smaller than me. I say, okay, prove it. Data models. We've all worked with data models. I used to be a data modeler. We had, at one point, I think 17 active versions of the same data model in one program. Because the developers said, I'm making a change, and did it. They didn't even put the request into the DBAs. It was misaligned. When we try to create data, and we do system integration testing, guess what happens? It just won't work. Yet they say, we're doing so many great points. There was no communication between different development groups. Everything was misaligned. Unapproved development efforts. And I said, Agile teams, high-quality teams need to be adaptive. And I needed to create the support infrastructure to support an adaptive environment, whether it's traditional or Agile, whatever you want. What was needed to influence reality? Well, I needed to make sure that my data could be shared amongst organizations, yet secure. They needed to align it, standardize it, all these different things. For performance, it needed to be volumized, versions. I need the ability to retest like this. Let me ask a question. Don't need the microphone here. How many of you request data from an organization or another group? Show of hands. Okay. How long does it take normally to get that data back into your environment? There's only 4 of you, so you can just shout it out. How long? 3 weeks. 3 months. Never. Never. You're going to say never. Okay. I have a slide coming up which is going to be very interesting. Think about it. We're agile. Our sprints are 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And we're QA, we're testers. And you just said the norm is 3 to 4 weeks. I had sometimes never because the models are out of line. So I had to figure out a way that I could support an adaptive environment for test data quality. I also knew that there were business rules inside these data models that were all over the place. So the first thing I did with these Scrum Masters was that I spoke about Agile Principles. And I wasn't going to be a hard case. I wanted to focus on 4. And I had different sessions and meetings during the day, and I said, look, these are my interpretations of the Agile Principles. There's 12 Agile Principles. I want to make sure that your focus is on making sure that the software that we get works. I want you to make sure that you create an environment that allows change in requirements. How you do that? Sorry. Whenever I see a camera, it's a natural instinct. How you create that environment is up to you. I empower you to make decisions. I want to make sure that you tune and adjust your behavior to the changes in the development cycle, to the changes in the atmosphere. How you cater for dealing with groups and companies outside of the USA. Make sure you create an environment that supports that. And we're going to measure our status one way, working software. That's all I wanted you to do. But I didn't tell them how to do it. I said, these are principles. These aren't practices. They're not processes. These are principles. I try to live my life by these principles. Things like, let's see now, maintain a constant pace. We all work. How many of us work 8 hours a day? You work 8 hours a day. No more, no less. Fantastic. One person. How many work more than 10 hours a day? 12 hours a day. How many people sometimes work weekends? That does not align itself to a constant pace. Unless you're used to doing 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, then you'll probably die. Frequently work together. How many people work at home on their own? So do I most of the time. But in business, you need to have that face-to-face contact. Get what I'm trying to say? These are just the principles. Not only for work, I actually use them for life. Can test data management really be reactive? The important thing here is agile teams require agile data. Yet 3 to 4 weeks, 3 to 4 months to get data to them means they're going to fail. We were failing. We could not test these hundreds of points coming down the pipeline. The problem with agile data is exactly that. It has to be agile, it needs to be responsive, it needs to be reactive. So I needed to start creating a foundation. I created a foundation by basically starting that test data management was a task. It was a story that needed to be considered by the entire project team. If you ignored test data, then you ignored the success of the project. There's a phrase I use a lot throughout this. And if you're going to walk away with anything, walk away with this. If you don't understand the test data, you do not understand the application. Period, full stop. You don't. Yet, our organizations put very little value on test data provisioning. It's just going to be there. Take a copy of production. If you don't understand that data, you don't understand the application. If the developers don't understand how they're going to test their work, you're going to get crap coming through the QA. Pardon my French. I also reminded my QA teams that we were a service. Test data was a service and therefore had a service level agreement. Some Agilists could argue, well, hold on, you're going against some of the principles here. And I said, we're in a very large organization. You cannot always turn around to someone, a senior VP, a VP, a CIO, and say, hey, I'm Agile. I couldn't give a crap, I'm doing it my way. Well, you get fired. There's no argument about it. But you need to be able to influence your senior management and say, I want to introduce some changes that will benefit the company and will therefore make you look like a champion. Tools. I'm an HP bigger. I've been using HP since 1997. Love it, in the right environment. I've used IBM tools, I've used all the big guys. How many people here depend on tools to get their work done? It should be pretty much all of you. Who uses HP? IBM, CompuWare, and here's the big one, open source. Open source is becoming very interesting. In a large company, to get open source testing tools accepted is a very difficult thing to do, because there are certain number crunching people who say, you want $2 million to go buy Quality Center and WinRunner, or QTP now, and Performance Center? Okay, just give me a justification, I'll do it. You want $1,600 to go buy Jira? Not a chance in hell. So I had to go look at the different tools. I happen to have left Disney and gone to work for a tools vendor, but I'm not going to promote that too much. Grid tools, data production. But I went up outside and I looked at all the big guys, all the small guys, and I had to look at the tools. I needed to make sure that I could leverage the right technology with these tools. They had to be transparent. I needed to know how they worked and what impact they were going to have in my environment. Integration was key. I've mentioned HP. I needed to make sure whatever tool I selected could fully integrate, let me rephrase that, could integrate at some level with a number of different products I had on the market inside of the company. Not just the ones I use, the ones our partners use, and the ones different groups in the company used. I implemented what I believed were best practices, and I made sure that we had an empirical learning system so these practices could be distributed across the different groups. I also told my guys, you will own the data. Now, who owns the production data? What's your answer? You don't need the mic, just quickly. Who owns the production data? The client or the product owner? Who else could possibly own the production data? Good. Sorry? Testers own the production data? No, no. They'd like to, yeah. Developers would like to. I know a guy in Nigeria who would like to own the production data. And he says, I'll get $1 million if I give it to him. So I wanted my QA teams, my test data provisioners, to own that data. And all this is part of owning the data. And they went, we can't do all that. I go, I'll give you the right tools. You'll make it work. Not understanding the data means you don't understand the application. They needed to understand that data. It wasn't just producing data for the hell of it. They needed to understand what it was being used for. There was a number of different risky paths that they had to cater for. One of the biggest ones up there is ambiguous requirements. What do I mean by ambiguous requirements? Anyone? We'll go for the microphone now. You still taking pictures on?
Simple, clear, and complete for all who have to work with the requirement.
Give me an example, if you can.
Reduce the speed of a trade operation from 5 seconds to 2 seconds.
That doesn't seem to be ambiguous. That's pretty
unambiguous.
Well, okay, unambiguous is that. Give me an example of ambiguous requirements.
Make it faster.
Exactly. I want a system that runs faster than the one today. And I would see things like, as a user of the credit card system, I may be able to use American Express and Visa, but not MasterCard, if I'm over the age of 18, but under the age of retirement. And I go, what? How can you test that? How can you develop that? I told my guys that if they were going to get requests for data, if you saw the word could, should, may, and I gave them this list, reject it immediately because it's ambiguous. Don't just try to do something and then say, but could you send me some more information? Just reject it. What was I trying to do? I was trying to teach the people who requested the data to understand what the data was about and how they were going to use it. The data is a valuable asset. My people needed to understand how to do operational analysis, data extraction. They needed to be DBAs. How many testers here have qualifications in some form of DBA certification? One person. Two people. Which database? Oracle. Oh, that surprises me. So I'm talking to QA people, or was I? Was I talking to DBAs? Can the DBA do testing? Do they understand the business? These are the problems I had. I had to support a number of different environments as well as find people who understood the data. So I started looking for a certain mindset. I got Agile Mindset, which these kind of align to, but I was trying to find people who could be what I call a test data engineer. It's a new role, and it really does combine DBAs, testing, and business. They needed to have an iterative mindset, not an incremental mindset. Anyone here often think incremental and iterative in the same light? Yeah, okay. If you did, I'll explain why there's a difference. They needed to know how to communicate. They needed to understand how to learn things. I wanted them to be aggressive with quality. This is the coming up to someone and saying, make it better. I think testers are sometimes too wimpy. If there's a problem and you have the ability to talk to the person you believe caused the problem, go to them. Don't send them an IM. Go to them and talk about it. So I wanted people who had strong personalities. They were innovative, and I gave my guys the chance to be innovative. They needed to be a team member. When you're working in large organizations as well as small, you need teams around you that you can trust. One of the things that I also looked for is that I only wanted the best of the best people on my teams. I was in Amsterdam a couple of weeks ago, and somebody asked a question. 10 minutes, thank you. Somebody asked a question. In Agile teams, how do you deal with people that don't perform as well as the other people? And the guy on stage said, well, you need to be a mentor to them, you need to nurture them, and consider what they want in their career, etc. I turned to my sales guy next to me, I said, fire his ass. And the guy said, why? I said, that's a bit rash. I said, we're Agile. We are the best of the best. We're not here. I mean, it's a very arrogant point of view. We're not here to train people. We're here to get the job done as quick as we can with high quality. No offense, if you're a trainee, you're a junior person, then go to a traditional team, learn your skill set, and prove yourself that you're good enough to be part of an Agile team. Anyone disagree with that? Thank God. It's a very arrogant view, but you get what I'm trying to say here. Transition and challenges. Who's a project manager here? No one dares put their hand up. Who used to be a project manager? I knew you would be. I had a feeling you would be. Becoming a Scrum Master must have been very difficult, yes or no? Well, I'm so good, it didn't really matter. Yep, you saw in the pink shirt. Yep. You're not a Scrum Master. Okay, it doesn't matter. There's a certification course I can do for you for a couple of grand. Project managers believe in the almighty percentage. We're 17% done this week, and next week we're 18%. And I go, how do you figure that out? You know, we're testing something, we're 97.5% done. And I go, if I was building an airplane, would you mind coming on with me when I'm 97.5% done? Would you feel comfortable with that? No, you wouldn't. Becoming a Scrum Master is completely different is very difficult in the transition from a PM, because I believe Scrum Masters are leaders. They're the people who make sure there's no obstacles. If you need a new chair because your back hurts, I'll get it for you. If you need a database change, I'm there to help you. Try asking a project manager for a new chair. That ain't going to happen. So I had to deal with project managers and explain what we were trying to do. Testers had to become owners. We created this new role called test engineer. And I needed a get-it-done attitude. I didn't need to hear in stand-up meetings or sit-down meetings, it's not my problem. Oh, yes, it is. If you know about it and you're doing nothing about it, it's your problem. Remember, I was empowered. I love this job. I gave problems to people. Retrospectives. Do anyone here practice retrospectives? How many people retrospect their retrospective? Keep your hand up. It's a fantastic science, yet most of us don't even think about it. And it's pretty simple. The stuff that we identified in retrospective N shouldn't appear in retrospective N+1. But not many of us actually monitor that. That's all it needs. At the end of each retrospective, the Scrum Master would say, who's going to own these problems that are not going to happen again? When it comes to N+1, I walk in and say, great job, guys. Let's have a look at who owned what and has it been rectified. Nobody wanted to come up to me and say, we haven't fixed it, Ray. I was an aggressive QA manager. What's it take to lead in an agile environment? 6'4" and British. It was hard. Agile is hard. Working in large companies is hard. Test data is hard. Everything is hard. If it was simple, we wouldn't be here. Anyone could do it. What's it take to lead in an agile-like environment? For someone in QA and in test data, collaborate in all directions, spearhead quality, inherit the best practices. Go out there and find out what other teams are doing outside of your program. When it comes to roles and responsibilities, I had roles and responsibilities for DBAs, roles and responsibilities for testers. It became very apparent producing this data needed this new test data engineer role. It was not a secondary function anymore, and I needed to go get budget to actually hire more people to do this role. Yet when I walked in, it was just expected to be supported by the DBAs. I needed to make sure whatever data my guys produced was fit for purpose. I love this phrase. It's one of my company's best. Fit for purpose. How many here have easy access to data flow diagrams before they start testing? 1, 2, 3. That proves it all, guys. How many people would like data flow diagrams before they test? Most of us. Excellent. You're not putting your hand up in the back there. Is that because you're sitting in the back or you're just in the wrong room? Happy path testing. Anyone not know what happy path testing is? Not know? Person in the back, thank you for being honest. It's nothing to do with being happy or high. Basically, it's when QA says, we're running out of time, we're just going to make sure the basic simple path from A to B to C works. Everything else, we'll keep our fingers crossed. That's what was happening. It was happy path testing, partially because we didn't have the data. I personally believe that testing is a dying art. This is very controversial, but it needs to be put in context. I personally believe as we become more agile and developers take on more of the core testing, that testers, traditional testers, need to start hitting the boundary tests. They understand what's going on about the product. We can assume through unit testing, behavioral-driven testing, that the core product's going to be working. And I wanted my QA teams to try to focus on this. What it meant was we pushed more onto development to get their job done better. I also said, if you can't verify the data, don't give it to them. If we don't know how they're going to test it, why they're going to test it, don't give it to them. We used to get requests, can I get a subset of production for this, that, and the other? And we go, well, yeah. Why? What are you going to use it for? Testing. No, tell us why. If you can't justify it, there is no value in it. The business. Haven't really spoken about the business. Well, they loved what we were doing because we were pushing back and increasing the quality of the product. So we were pushing back on the defects. We were pushing back on slowing things down. Don't run. I know. I needed to build relationships, not only with the product owners, but with everyone. And I got my QA managers and the testers involved. We focused on the short term. Agile is 2 to 4 weeks. Well, not Agile, but Scrum, as we were trying to practice, 2 to 4 week sprints. Did I care less what happened after 2 to 4 weeks? Well, yeah. But I didn't put that pressure on my teams. I said, just focus on the requests that needed to be fulfilled immediately, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. But you better hit the SLA. Importance of being transparent. So I introduced something new into the Scrum meetings. I said, here's my little sticky before you start planning, and it's called data. And the developers would say, well, that's what your job is. And I go, well, yours is a program. It doesn't mean you can't have a sticky on it. And I said, you need to be aware that you need to make data requests. And they said, well, when do we do that? I said, before you test. They said, but we do test-driven development. I said, so you better know what your data looks like before you start programming. It was the mindset shift. Next steps. Basically, invest big time in an Agile methodology. It's obvious. This entire conference has been talking about invest in Agile methodologies. No one here can tell you exactly how to do that. You know, we're very theoretical, but when it comes to putting it into practice, each and every person, each and every company needs a different way of doing it. You need to learn it. It's adaptive in itself. Develop a quality-driven practice. What I mean by this is that if I was your lead, your manager, and you came for your review, if I said to you, you're doing a great job, over the next year, I want to make sure that you double your output capacity. It's measurable. But if I said to you in a review, and I said, I want you to increase the quality of your work by 25%, and I want you to make sure the customer's more happy, well, hold on, how am I going to do that? But you know what? It is possible, but you're going to have to start thinking. Most people cannot qualify quality, but they can quantify quality. So I challenge my testers and my TDEs to increase their level of quality, and it makes you start thinking differently. So what happened in the end? I'm actually a slide missing here. You picked the wrong presentation. What happened in the end was that I created a team of 6 people to be TDEs. It took us about 2 to 3 months to implement the tools, implement the practice, methodology, SLAs, document and train people who needed to make data requests. It wasn't hard. We screwed up left, right, and center. We missed our SLAs. But over time, what we found, do you remember my little charts of how many points? The first half a dozen sprints, we were getting 3, 6, 12. Sprint 7 or sprint 8, we went up to 200 points of system-integrated test work. Because suddenly, the data started working across multiple silos. What happened is we were leading a year into it, 1,000 points of development work came down the line. We hit 500 to 600 points of integrated testing, which is really good when you're going over 10, 11, 12 different development efforts. We were always behind, but we were getting there. It was a large organization that suddenly put value on the data that they used. It was an asset. Developers understood they could not program if they didn't understand that data. The testers knew that the data they were going to get, if requested correctly, could be generated and synthesized across multiple applications within days instead of weeks or even months. Sometimes we had hours, and we could reprioritize the work by using specific tools to generate thousands, if not millions of records for performance testing and other services. It's hard, it's tiring, it's a focus on quality, and there's a new role called a test data engineer. Done. How am I doing for time?
Spot on. We'll take a question. Come on. One question.
Yes, sir. How much did I earn at Disney?
I was a few weeks ago in Orlando, so it was very
Good.
nice and very hot. The question I have regards the ownership of test data, and I was a little surprised that you said, okay, the team is responsible.
Yep.
What I'm trying to implement in my company is that our IMO organization is information management, and that consists of business architects and application managers, that they are responsible for the largest set of test data, regression test data, and that will be changed by the project. But the ownership lies in that department because they know what the business looks like and what is representative for that.
Okay, so if I understood that correctly, and we both have very strong accents, so I apologize if I misunderstood. So your business application units feel that they own the data, the test data?
They are starting to feel it as their responsibility because it's a real asset.
It is an asset, but they know how to use it, but do they actually do the testing? If they do, this is a different case.
No, they are accountable for the quality, but not responsible.
They're accountable for the goods, they own the quality, but they're influenced by your testing teams. Your testing teams probably know more about the product than they do. So they can dig down and do the deep diving. That's why I say that QA, or specifically your test data engineers, the people who generate the data, should take full ownership for it. Your business people are customers. They're clients. They might feel they own it, but they really don't. They own that instance of the data. They don't actually own the generation of the data. Does that help your answer? Kind of? Mm-hmm. Every situation's different. That's right.
We have a bit of...
Thank you very much.